Hey guys, today in this video I'll be showing you absolutely everything you need to know about completing and expeditioning Salamander stages 13 to 15 with Viole, Grace, and Valkyrie. I'll be going in depth, so this may be a long video, so I'm going to include the timestamps in the description below if you want to skip to the parts that you need. Before we start, I'd like to give credit to Circular Object on Reddit for posting this strat for us to see. Now I don't know if they're original creator or anything, but it's because of them I was able to do this. Thanks bro! First, let's start off with why this strat works to make sure you understand what's happening. So Valkyrie is probably the single best hero for duoing advent bosses, or any other content for that matter, with any other DPS unit. Her C2 recovers her health and the other unit's health by 10 to 15% of her HP, but isolates herself for one turn, which means that she can't act or take damage for the rest of that turn, and also reduces the damage taken by the ally she healed by 50%. Now it doesn't say anymore, but she also actually gets hit whenever that ally gets hit, which ties into her passive. Whenever she gets hit, she recovers the ally with the lowest health by 10% of her own HP, not by the HP of her ally. So to recap, she can't be damaged by regular means, takes 50% of the damage of her ally, and because of that, whenever she or her ally gets hit, whoever has the lowest HP will get healed. Note that her passive also works with dots, which is the only source of damage she's going to be taking during these runs, because the Salamander is going to apply burns to her that's going to damage her before she can use her C2 at the start of the turn. Overall, she has a great kit and is a very solid hero. Our damage dealer Viole is the perfect unit to pair Valkyrie with for Salamander. He is an ice element hero, which means he gets elemental advantage over every enemy on these stages. Now what this means is that Viole gets an additional 20% crit and reduces the target's block chance when attacking any fire element enemy. When getting hit by any fire element enemy, Viole will increase his own block chance by 50% and reduce the enemy's crit rate by 30%. Viole is also naturally tanky with an average defense of 908 and a very high HP of about 145,000, just 10,000 HP below Phantom Thief Liddy, who has the highest base HP in the game, and almost 50% more HP than King Dark with about 100k HP. Viole's Chain 2 skill strips all buffs of an opponent in the back and front row, and Pierce attacks both opponents by 120 to 150% attack. The strip doesn't really matter in these duo runs, as if the boss does get a shield up, you probably lost the run, which I'll explain why later in the video. But this skill has nice damage with the Pierce added on, which allows you to bypass some of the enemy's defensive stats, and also importantly, attacks an enemy in the front and the back row, which makes sure that the boss will always get hit by the skill when doing expeditions and auto. Now, Viole has amazing damage scaling with his passive, which boosts his attack and crit damage by 15% every time he attacks without having a debuff, which he will never have on these runs, up to 75% each. With this, Viole hits like a truck and can max out his passive by turn 5 or lower. For these reasons, Viole is really good for dueling with Valkyrie and Salamander stages, so if you don't have Viole, it's going to be very hard to find a replacement, but there may be one out there if you have really good gear. For Valkyrie, she has no replacement units period. There's no unit in the game that can do what she does better in duo runs. When you're positioning your units, you're going to want to put Valkyrie on the 3rd slot so you can ensure that she goes first before Viole every turn so that she can put up her buffs before enemies can attack. Put Viole anywhere in the front row to make sure that he can't get hit by the boss's regular attack, as the boss will only hit units in the back row with it. For your skills, you're going to want to turn off every skill except C2 for both units, and yes, this includes Viole's EX skill. Since we're only using 2 units, we're always going to have the mana and chain blocks to use both chain 2s every turn. Now let's go back and see what kind of gear we should have equipped. For Valkyrie, the gear requirement is actually pretty low, at least for 13. I could grab a trash unleveled gear and still be able to expedite 13. Keep in mind my Viole is pretty overstated in this, but that's besides the point. The only damage Valkyrie is going to take in these runs are from the burns that the boss is going to apply with his regular attack. She's going to take burn damage for 2 turns, then the boss will remove these burns every 3rd turn and give Valkyrie a chance to heal up for that 1 turn. For this reason, the only stats we care about is health and debuff resistance. Every other stat is completely useless. One thing to note is that to actually resist the burns, you're going to need a high amount of debuff resistance. With the gear I'm using on the bottom clip, Valkyrie has 87.4% debuff resistance, but it's not like I have a bunch of rolls into it. My artifacts rolled into it once as a substat and once as an upgrade. Here I'm using a full set of S resistance gear, and I've awakened all the debuff resistance nodes up to 4 star for Valkyrie. As you can see, it's pretty uncommon to resist a burn with these stats. I think I resist like 2 burns out of 20 plus in total. Because of this and the fact that heals scale with HP, we're going to prioritize HP. But for higher stages, especially Salamander 15, Valkyrie either needs a high amount of debuff resist or a level 5 good 10, or she was not going to be able to survive the sheer amount of burn damage the boss is going to do to her. The optimal gear set for Valkyrie is going to be 4 resist, 2 vitality, with 2 phoenix artifacts. Now I'm pretty sure almost no one has a full set of SS resist gear, so if you can't get an effective amount of resist with an S rank resist set, we're going to throw all the debuff resistance away and focus solely on HP. This is going to make your optimal gear set 4 SS vitality and 2 S vitality to maximize the amount of health we get. Now try to make sure 2 of your SS gear is in the armor and the glove slot, since these types of gear gives HP while the other 2 give attack. If you have any exclusive equipment that grants HP or debuff resistance, you can put which one suits your build for her. I don't think she needs extra speed to go first, but I have unlocked some of her speed nodes from her awakening tree, which can give up to 30 speed at 3 stars. Since we can't get defensive stats from accessories, we can leave this spot blank for this type of content. For our relics, we have a few decent options. Valkyrie's personal relic is great if you have it at a higher level. I personally have mine at level 3 and a 12% HP boost is huge. And yup, you know it, I've mentioned it, you've probably seen the effect while watching this video playing. For the good 10, this broken ass relic is indeed also insane in here. It lets you bypass the need for debuff resistance and helps top up Valkyrie's health. This also makes sure that her health is higher than Viole's, so that Viole is the one who's getting healed if he's low. Some more good options include Fever Time for the 20% boost to healing, a high level Beach Grill Party for the extra health boost, or the B rank relic Hate's Munch Munch, which gives a similar but smaller effect. You can also use Besties for the defense boost and damage sharing effect. Make sure you use the relics best suited for what you have, so if you have a level 110 or a level 1 Valkyrie relic for example, please don't use them. Use Fever Time and Hate's Munch Munch, which can be easily maxed out instead. Now for Viole, this is where your stats are going to matter the most. You need to have at least decent gear, so we're talking about artifacts that are fully upgraded to +7. Because of this, it's harder to switch around gear to test different sets because we won't have many good DPS gear because of the lack of upgrade materials, so in general, you should just slap on the best DPS gear you have on them and see if it works. Now before we get into detail, I want to remind you guys that guild buffs exist and that they give a huge boost to PvE stats. My guild, bless them, has 24/7 buffs up, and without this, I know I would not be able to expedite Salamander 15. An extra 15% crit, 10% attack, and 10% HP is just amazing, so you really want to try to find a guild that at least occasionally runs these if you can. Viole's optimal gear set is going to be a mix of blood sucking and destruction gear, either 4 destruction 2 blood or 3 destruction 3 blood. We're going to want as much sustain as possible, and these sets is going to do just that. If you want to go a step even further, we're going to want 1 blood-sucking salamander artifact and 1 destruction phoenix artifact, specifically a Hand of Ignis with damage boost to opposite attributes, with most rolls going to skill damage. Although, I'm pretty sure almost no one has this kind of gear since it's very niche and has an absurd amount of RNG to get good rolls on. If you don't have blood-sucking gear upgraded, just run your best DPS gear. You just have to make sure that you're using 2 salamander artifacts to increase our damage as much as possible. These are the artifacts I'm using right now. They're not amazing, but they do have the perfect substats for what we want, or at least my staff does. If you have similar gear, you should be able to +7 them and have everything work out. Now, I don't have proper counter gear to test it out, so I'm not too sure, but I wouldn't recommend counter for this content. The problem with counter is that it's very RNG dependent. If you can't get a high amount of counter, it's barely going to proc and it's going to be a waste of stats. Even if you can, you're going to need the counter to proc in the first place, and the enemy adds to hit Viole instead of Valkyrie. The boss is also only going to hit Viole every 3 turns, so you're going to be doing a lot less damage to the boss compared to a regular DPS set. If you're using a counter set, you're also going to need to use counter specific relic that may not be as good as some of the relics I'm going to mention in a bit. One thing to note about our artifacts is that we really don't want debuff accuracy. We don't need debuff accuracy at all, since landing the unbuffable does nothing to any of the enemies, and it becomes detrimental to your run if you land it on the boss. I have only 14.5% debuff accuracy from Awakenings, and I still sometimes land the debuff. If it lands at the wrong time on the boss, I'm probably gonna lose that run if I'm doing Salamander 15. If the boss has any debuffs before he does his chain 3, he's gonna cleanse it and grant himself a shield. At the start of every turn, if he has a shield, he's gonna get a permanent attack boost that can't be removed. If this happens, Viole can easily get one shot by the boss the next time he uses his C3. For our accessory, the stats we're looking for are skill damage, holy damage to opposite attribute, crit rate, crit hit damage, and attack. Get a mix of any of these 3 and you should be good to go. This is the accessory I'm currently using and it works great. For our relics, the best in slot gear would be a Dawn of Retaliation and a Summer Vacation means Water Plays that is at least level 3. When you have these relics maxed, they give a 40% attack boost and a 35% additional damage to weaker attributes, which is an insane boost to Viole's damage output. Of course, if you're using a counter set, you're going to want to use things like Viole's Personal Relic, a high level Lone Shark's Pressure, and Marine Girl's Summer Vacation. Other good options for our relics are Annihilation, which gives you a 20% attack boost at turn 3 and onwards if you have Viole's EX skill unlocked, Double Dragon Kick, which gives a 15% attack boost on Chain 2 skills, Path of the Sword for a 25% damage boost on enemies with a higher health than 50%, and Exemplary Behavior of Rack Leader. We want as much damage as we can, so even if your Viole is having trouble surviving, it's going to be hard to switch out for a defensive relic if you want to. With this, go try out the Viole Valkyrie combo and see if it works for you. Make sure you auto and don't interfere so that you can see what's happening and what went wrong if you failed. If you do fail, it's going to be because of a mix of any of these 3 reasons. Valkyrie can't survive, Viole can't survive, or Viole doesn't have enough damage. Find out which one it is and do some appropriate changes, like swapping your gear and relics around. Some things you can do are, first of all, make sure you're using maxed out relics. Don't expect to clear these stages if your artifacts are only like +4. Level up your chain 2 skills to max, especially Viole's. Level the base stats of your relics. Both maxed out S and SS relics easily give out stats equivalent to 1 to 2 upgrades of an SS artifact. You can also check out your awakening tree and get some extra stats there as well. Now, you've done all you can, tried out every gear combination, and things still don't work. Your last option is going to be to add specific heroes to the party. The reason I put this last is because adding more heroes makes everything so much more inconsistent. If things don't work out perfectly, you could easily lose your run within the first 2 or 3 turns. Either Valkyrie puts her C2 buff on someone that's not Viole, or the card order messes up and Viole ends up using his chain 2 before Valkyrie does, or Valkyrie didn't get to use her chain 2 in a turn and died instead. Things like these are problems with this, but if you have nothing else, adding some heroes to the party can make very significant changes. First, let's talk about Kun. Now, Kun is actually just straight up a god here, but before you use him, please make sure your Kun has a maxed out chain 2, or else his effectiveness is going to be cut in half. All we want from Kun is for him to use C2 3 times to give the permanent 30% attack boost to Viole, then die. When you manual, you're going to want to use Kun C2 first, then Valkyrie C2, then Viole C2. As long as Kun survives one single turn without getting hit, he can max out the attack boost and is ready to die. For his gear, we don't care at all about it. Just make sure he's squishy enough to die in one hit. The reason for this is because we never want Valkyrie to heal Kun or apply her C2 buff on Kun, or Viole has a chance of dying. For his relics, swap out Valkyrie's Fever Time if you're using it and put it on Kun. Then give Valkyrie one of the different relics I mentioned before. If you don't have any, Just give Valkyrie any relic that gives a high HP with its base stats. If this still doesn't work, look through your relic box. If you have any of these relics, Notice of Crime, Sage of the East, the Master Sense of Duty, or Blue Dragon Reflex, add level 1 units or units with no gear to your team with these relics equipped. We do not want these units to live. The only reason they're here is to provide the relic aura for the team. Try not to use units with passives that let them live longer. If you have Master Sense of Duty, an example of a good unit to put this on would be Choco BB or Light. They don't have immortality, and instead, they provide buffs to the team when they die. Before the level cap break, this is an example of a team that I personally had to use to expedite Salamander 15. Because I introduced so many new factors, the amount of RNG was pretty high, but this was the only way I could have enough damage and survivability to clear Salamander 15 back then. About 40% of the time, I would get 50-minute runs. 45% of the time, I would get 2-hour runs or fail, but 15% of the time, I could get 20-minute runs. As long as you can clear the stage on manual once, you should have that chance, however small, to successfully expedite that stage. These are the skills I used. You don't necessarily want all skills turned off. If a unit doesn't die, their skill blocks are going to stay and clog up the space that you want for Kun, Viole, and Valkyrie. I turned off Jade Emperor Dewi's skills off since I gave him besties, so if anyone that isn't Valkyrie gets hit, the damage sharing from besties would kill him. I did this and put him in the back because units tend not to get hit as much as units in the front when they're there. Valkyrie should always be on the third slot on the team, and I recommend that you put Viole in the first slot. This is because Valkyrie always buffs the first other unit in the team with her C2 if everyone is at full health. If you want to know what I used to clear each individual stage, here it is. I don't have the full stat page for the earlier stages, but you should be able to get an idea of what I had. For Viole, my artifacts, accessory, and relics were all the same throughout stages 13 and 15. At 13, Viole was 3-star, and for 14, I had to 5-star him to get the extra defensive stats to survive. As I showed just a bit earlier, I needed to SSS Viole to complete 15, and I used the strat involving Kun and other relics that could buff Viole. My Valkyrie was actually using a 4 resist 2 vitality set up until recently where I decided to switch to full HP. I had her at 4-star, and these are my artifacts and relics used. Now that we can level heroes up to 105, my Viole and Valkyrie are strong enough to duo stage 15 by themselves. I leveled Viole to 100 and kept Valkyrie at 90. I left them there since it already worked and I didn't want to waste any more resources I didn't have to. They have the same gear and relics, except for Valkyrie, who I switched to a 4 SS Vitality, 2 S Vitality for more HP. Now I can get 15-minute runs pretty consistently. I probably have to retry about 3 to 4 times to get a load time that I want. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope this guide has helped you out, and let me know if I missed anything I should have included. Later.